Hello everyone, it's Hedgehog. As always, I don't know who else it would be. But this is going to be a much looser video. Not super highly edited. I don't really have a script. I have a little outline here of a couple things I want to talk about. I did a very similar thing with Elden Ring back when it came out last February. So if you've been around for that long, you might recognize this format. But I mostly wanted to just talk about a recent release that came out without having to spend 50 million thousand hours editing it, especially because I'm right in the middle of the next Higurashi video. So today I'm talking about another visual novel though, right on topic. It's one that just released a couple of days ago, maybe like a week ago now. At least as upon date of recording. I am, of course, referring to Witch on the Holy Night, which is a Type Moon visual novel. For those of you not familiar with the name Type Moon, you might recognize the name Fate Stay Night, Fate Zero, Fate Apocrypha, any of the Fate variations. This is the company responsible for the original visual novel, and a lot of the other games, Fate Grand Order, principal among them, and Witch on the Holy Night, or Mahoyo, as I'm going to abbreviate it because that's an abbreviation of its Japanese name, is a game that takes place kind of in the same universe as Fate Stay Night. So a lot of the concepts of mages and stuff carry over, but you do not need to have played Fate Stay Night or any of the other Type Moon visual novels to follow along with this one and understand what's happening. Some things might make a little less sense, but Type Moon makes that any of their standalone works in the same universe can be an entry point, so it's all good there. But this is a really big deal, specifically because this is the first visual novel, the first release of Type Moon that they have ever released an official English language version for. So this is huge. Because up until this point, people have had to rely on fan translations. I myself have been reading a fan translation of Fate Stay Night, and it's not great. So it's really, really good to see, an official English release finally. And a lot of the reason I'm making this video is essentially to sell you on buying Mahoyo so that you can basically tell Type Moon that, hey, we should keep doing this. This sold really well in Western territories, so we should definitely keep releasing English language versions of our games. Maybe if we do a Fate Stay Night remake at some point in the future, maybe we can release that in English too. Essentially, a couple of notes before I really get into it. First of all is that I have not finished Witch on the Holy Night as of the time recording this. Much like Elden Ring, I've gotten a portion of the way through the game enough that I feel like I can talk about it in at least some initial impressions detail. And second of all is that it is exclusively available on the Nintendo Switch and the PlayStation 5. So I could have plugged in my capture card and gotten footage from the game, but I was too lazy to do that. So what you're watching right now is trailer footage that I'm just gonna loop over and over again to give you something to look at while I talk. But yeah, that's the deal. That's the deal. So without further ado, what exactly is Mahoyo? So Mahoyo takes place in, I believe, the late 80s. The late 80s, I believe, in a small town in Japan called Misaki, I think. Pretty sure Misaki. Yes, Misaki is correct. And actually, oddly enough, for a visual novel, its main character is female. Her name is Aoka Aozaki. She's a pretty famous character within the world of the Nasuverse, which is named after the guy who has written all these works, whose last name is Nasu. And basically the story setup is that she is living in an old manor on the hill with her roommate Alice Kuonji, and basically they end up coming into contact with this weird guy who just moved to town. He used to live in the mountains with no electricity, so he's not familiar with any kind of modern day convenience. His name is Sojiro. And he ends up, through various circumstances, having to live with them because he gets caught up in mage shenanigans, and like they can't let him go because you're not supposed to tell people who are not magic users about magic shit. So he ends up having to live with them, which is great because he was struggling to pay for his room and board in the city anyway. And there's some kind of an overarching plot, I'm assuming, involving the Aozakis and the Kuonji families, who are somehow related to each other. I haven't gotten too deep into it, but that's basically the plot so far. It's a very chill visual novel. It's got some huge action scenes, don't get me wrong. Like, it's very much got some big, bombastic, enormous moments. If any of you have read it so far, you know the one I just got past, no doubt, which was crazy and wild and fucking, yeah. The visual novel can reach huge heights of action, but it has a lot of really quiet, melancholy, thoughtful moments. Its overall tone is very quiet, thoughtful, and slow, which for some people is a turn off. For me, it's a turn on. I like stories that are like that. So yeah, basically, if that interests you, if you want to see cool anime shit about mages living in weird Victorian manners, this is the story for you. As far as its presentation is concerned, I think this is the big talking point about MaHoYo upon its release, or at least re-release. I forgot to mention that this is originally a game released in 2012, and it has been remade. So basically, what's remarkable about MaHoYo is you see this trailer footage that I'm showing you right now. This is like actually what the game looks like. So Type Moon have made a fuck ton of money off their mobile games, Fate Grand Order specifically. And you can tell that they were able to just pour so many assets into this thing because the pictures are constantly changing. There's so many music tracks, there's so many character sprites, there's so many just background images. It's nuts. It's nuts how much shit this visual novel had poured into it. For those of you who are less familiar with visual novels, oftentimes visual novels default to having basic background, character sprites that change expressions every once in a while, telling you the story. MaHoYo is not like that. Its characters are constantly moving around the screen. It's constantly having like weird like depth changes. It has constant CGs, these constant like amazing images of characters doing cool shit. It's like a movie. It's literally like a movie that you're reading. It's fantastic. It's utterly unlike any visual novel I've ever seen before. Like, this is new heights of just crazy shit that they've put in this thing. And I know for those of you who are used to like other video games, you're probably like, oh wow, the pictures move a little more. But for people in the visual novel community, this is incredible. Like, it's huge. It's like, oh my god. I mean, what else is there to say? Like, that's... I need to drink some water. That's its big selling point for the remake, honestly, is just how impressive it looks. The art style itself is obviously great as well. They have the same artist they've been working with for years and years and years, and their art is utterly gorgeous. Utterly gorgeous. Their characters are many cute guys in this visual novel, and cute girls as well, for those of you interested in women, which probably for the majority of you watching this video on visual novels is the case, but for those rare breed like myself, there's some cute guys in there too. That kind of leads us, nice transition, I'm so pro, into its characters, which are kind of its selling point. Now, a little background. I'm very impressed with Witch on the Holy Night's characters, specifically because I just finished the Fate route on Fate's Day Night, which is the first of 3. And comparatively to that, these characters are written on a whole other level. And eventually, someday, I'm sure I will cover Fate's Day Night in more detail. And I will mention this, obviously, in more absorbent detail as well. I have the distinct feeling that a lot of the reason I'm not so keen on Fate's Day Night's characters is because I get the impression that the translation I'm reading is not the best. It feels like they've translated it very literally, which some people think is better. I disagree because I think there's a lot of room for misinterpretation when you translate something very literally, because one phrase can mean something very different in Japanese than it means in English. So a lot of the characters come off as like kind of dicks. which I don't feel like is the impression that I'm supposed to reach about them. But Witch and the Holy Knights characters are just have a whole other amount of depth. They're all very distinct and very fun and very cool. Most importantly, they're all very cool. The main character, Alco, is like a rare visual novel female heroine that isn't in an otome game. And she's great. You can tell that the basis of her character was formed on the kind of tsundere archetype, which, for those of you who are less familiar with anime terms, a tsundere is a girl, generally speaking, but can be a guy, who comes off initially as very cold and very haughty. One of the main catchphrases of the tsundere is, "It's not like I like you or anything, but baka," because obviously they eventually They eventually warm up to the protagonist. They eventually become more lovey-dovey, but they're initially, in modern day terms, they're the anime equivalent of Step on Me Mommy characters, kind of. They're not usually older than the protagonist, but they're very dominant characters. Alco is clearly based on that archetype, but instead of that being her whole character description, they've really fleshed out what that means and how a real person could act like that. So Alco is an incredibly stubborn individual. She always has motivations for being stubborn and being haughty, though, because she has all these secrets she has to keep from people, and she has to balance these two lives she has as a high school class president and as a magus, as a magician. Very, very, they're very complicated, and she has to balance these very carefully. And so she has to, maintain this front of utter composure all the time. But she's really a very hot-headed, stubborn person, so she gets angry very easily. And this leads to having those tsundere-ish tendencies, but they work entirely well for her character. It never feels like Alco never has a moment of tsundere-ness that feels out of character, or that feels like, oh, she said that because she's a tsundere. It always feels like it's very much within the bounds of her characterization. Our second kind of protagonist, occasionally the narration bounces over to him. He's named Sojiro. His name is spelled very oddly. From what I'm aware of, it's because for the spelling of character names, Type Moon insisted on a specific type of romanization, which leads character names to come out as very weird sometimes. So Sojiro is spelled Soujyuuro, but really it should probably be spelled Soujuro. Sojiro. Regardless. He has a very clear, distinct starting place for his character. That is to be the kind of VN protagonist guy. You know that guy. He's got brown hair. He's a nice guy. He cares about protecting his female classmates and doing heroics. But it's all played very oddly, because a lot of the reason why he has all of these things, why he has all these strict morals, is because he was raised in such a simple society in comparison to our modern day society, that he's viewed as weird by every single other character. Every single other character goes, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" But instead of being just the nicest guy you'll ever meet, everybody loves him, he's a fucking ditz. He's got such big himbo energy. He's got this inner wisdom to him, but most of the time he comes off as so fucking clueless, and nobody really knows what to do with him. And it's really funny, because this is kind of what I feel like if a visual novel protagonist was a real person. This is kind of how I feel like he really would be, and it's really interesting to see Nasu kind of take these character archetypes and extrapolate that as, what would this be like if this was a real person? So Sojiro is kind of that. He has a lot of he has a lot of the same tendencies as a visual novel protagonist usually does. Nasu himself, it seems, tried to do another take on deconstructing this kind of protagonist in Shiro from Fate Stay Night. He accomplishes it much better in Sojiro, because with Shiro, he's more kind of deconstructing the shonen protagonist a little bit, and in order to do that, he makes Shiro one of the weakest characters in the universe, but he makes him constantly have that hot-blooded shonen protagonist energy, like, I have to do everything to protect my friends, and he just comes off as a fucking asshole, dumbass. Like, I'm not gonna get too into it here. He comes off as kind of misogynistic sometimes because he has this want to protect people that specifically comes out in protecting Saber, who is the most badass knight in history, and you're this high school student, and he's going, no, I must protect you because you're a woman. He at one point he literally says that he's happy that a classmate of his got attacked on the way home from school because it brought out her feminine side. I shit you not. That is 100% the line. Again, I think that's a translation thing. I have a strong, firm opinion that was not originally the implication of what Shiro was saying, but it kind of comes off as that way in the fan translation. And experiencing Sojiro, I was a little bit hesitant, just because that was the only other, Nasu protagonist I'd ever really read before. But Sojiro does all those things that Shiro is, but he's just great. He's awesome. He is so cool. Sojiro is really cool. He's this clueless, ditzy guy, but he's so cool. Whereas Shiro was just a stupid dumbass. Sojiro is a dumbass, but he's a lovable dumbass. You love everything he does because he primarily it's because he acts as such a great counterbalance to Aoko, because Aoko is stubborn and hot-headed and is always trying to do things, and Sojiro just goes, hey, this isn't working. We could maybe try to do this other thing. And then she'll go, well, fuck, okay, fine, God, Jesus. And she never has any idea what to do with him. It's great. It's fun. Sojiro is a great character. The last kind of main character that I want to talk about that we've ever kind of spent any amount of time with is Alice Kuonji. She's Aoko's roommate. They live in the big manor together. And she is also a really great counterpoint to Aoko, because while Aoko is loud and intense, Alice is very quiet and very contemplative and very slow. We don't know much about her psychology-wise yet. Of course, I have the distinct feeling we are very quickly going to get to learn a lot more about her. The main thing we know about her right now, where I am, is that she's got some interesting fucking abilities as a magician. Her whole shtick is based on Mother Goose rhymes and on like fairy tale shit. And she uses these powers. She likes to summon familiars a lot to do her bidding. So she basically summons these monsters to do shit for her. And it's very, very cool how her powers work. I'm sure she'll get more screen presence. I hope she does. Right now, she's kind of played a very supporting role as we've been setting up Aoko and Sojiro's dynamic. But I have a feeling we'll get to learn much more about her soon. As far as the supporting cast goes, Toby Maru's great. He's the only person we've really spent any amount of time with yet. But all of the setup for these characters seems great, seems cool. I'm very excited to learn more about them, which is exactly what you want from someone a third of the way through your story. You want them to be wanting to know more about all the characters that we haven't learned about yet. And that means that they've invested in me. They've got me interested, and that's perfect. The characters are awesome. The characters, besides the visual component, the characters are the highlight of this story. They're great. I would talk about the voice acting. I tend to read VNs with the voice acting turned off because I read really, 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 really quickly. And that means that I'm always waiting for the voice actors to catch up with me. So I tend to turn the voice acting off just so I can speed through it at a comfortable pace. And also it helps when I am considering doing dubs of something, because then I can come up with my own impressions of what I think the characters sound like and everything, and not have that kind of be based on the Japanese performance, if that makes any sense. So I would talk about that. From what I've heard, the voice acting is great. I haven't really listened to it all that often, so I wouldn't really know. Obviously, like anything though, this game is not perfect. This visual novel is not perfect. There are a couple of minor complaints. I have noticed that there's quite a few typos here and there. Obviously, Witch in the Holy Night has probably 100,000 words. Probably more. Probably more like 200,000 words. So obviously you're gonna miss some typos. It does not inhibit your ability to read the story by any means. But it does get a little bit distracting occasionally, just because I've noticed sometimes there's even 2 or 3 in a chapter, which is a little bit much. I presume that they're probably going to patch it at some point and fix those typos inevitably. But that's just something to bear in mind when you go into it. It also has a tendency in some scenes, especially its big action scenes, to kind of drag on a little bit, as visual novels tend to do. It's usually not that much of a concern. It's just that the fact that the rest of it is so well paced that when those moments do show up, it's a little bit jarring. Like the chapter I'm thinking of specifically is, without spoiling too much, is the first big climactic scene, which is cool and awesome, but does go on for a bit too long. You could have cut out a lot of the middle section of it, and it would have worked just as well, because the characters basically run around and don't solve any problems for a good portion of time. But that's kind of a visual novel. That's kind of a flaw with the medium in general, is that visual novels just tend to drag on a little bit. So that's not really something I can hold against this story in particular. So that's basically what I have to say about this visual novel. It's awesome. Like, it's really, really good. It's really, 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 really good. I am enjoying my time with it so much. I'm only like a quarter or a third of the way through it, but I'm already scared for it to end. So, that's a great sign. And like I said at the beginning of this video, this is the first official English translation Type Moon has ever done. For those of you outside of the visual novel community, Type Moon is a huge, huge, huge name in the visual novel community. They have done some of the most famous visual novels of all time. Fate's Day Night, Sugehime, and now Mahoyo. So the fact that they have, and they've been infamous over the years for not doing English translations. So the fact that they're finally doing an English translation for one of their visual novels is huge. And I have the distinct feeling that the reason they decided to do it with a smaller project, with a less well-known project, is to see how well this would go over. Because if this goes over well, then there's definitely the possibility that they might work on translating some of their other visual novels, some of their bigger ones, like Sugehime, like Fate's Day Night. So please, if you have the money, it's $40. It will easily occupy you for 30-40 hours, depending on how quickly you read. Please go buy a copy. Go try it out. If you have a Switch, if you have a PS5, go do it. It's awesome. It's great. Especially if you have a Switch. The Nintendo Switch is such a good machine for reading visual novels, because you can curl up wherever you want with it, and you can just have the text 2 inches from your face, so it's really easy to read, and the screen is big enough that you still get all the details. It's awesome. Or you can plug it into the TV if you want. If you have the space and you have this and you have the room to do that, you can plug it into the TV too. Just buy this game. Please buy this game. Please buy this game. I promise you. Listen. On my honor as a writer, I promise you that the story will not disappoint you. Even if you don't read a lot of visual novels, this story is a great entry point for visual novels, because it has way less of the kind of weird tropey elements of visual novels that the genre, the medium is kind of known for. So it's a really, really good entry point into reading visual novels if you haven't really read a lot of them before. So yeah, go buy it. Go support them. Go tell Type Moon with the only way you can that this will be successful and they should do this more. So yeah, with that being said, I'm gonna go read it now, because I'm really excited to read more. And I will see you guys all in the Higurashi video when it releases, probably in January. I'm hoping. I think January. Sometime January seems like a reasonable estimate. Anyway, goodbye.